Back everybody to Joshua's Magic, a channel about the intersection about the spiritual and the ordinary. Today is another live stream considering some quotes from the Alice Bailey writings, this time on the theme of hope. And if you have any comments, questions, just leave them in the chat and I'll try to get to them. But we'll move on to the first quote of today. You can find these on my Instagram or Minds page, linked in the description below. So, anything that widens our horizon, that enables us to take a broader vision and a clearer view of what is going on. Oh, I just want to mention I have a channel announcement after I'm done with the quotes, so stick around for that if you want to hear it. Anything that widens our horizon, that enables us to take a broader vision and a clearer view of what is going on in the evolutionary process is of value to us, not because the accumulation of ascertained facts is of value, but because of what it enables us to do within ourselves. Our ability to think in wider and larger terms is increased. We are enabled to look beyond our self-centered point of view and to include within our consciousness other and different aspects than our own. In doing this, we are developing group consciousness, and we shall realize eventually that the apparently stupendous facts which we fought and died for down the ages and emphasized as the entire truth were, after all, but fragments of a plan and an infinitesimal portion of a gigantic sum total. Perhaps, therefore, when we come back to Earth again and can look back upon the things that interest us now, which we consider so important, we shall find how erroneous facts were as we then apprehend them. Facts, after all, do not matter. The facts of the last century are not facts now, and in the next century, scientists may laugh at our dogmatic assertions and wonder how we could have looked upon matter as we did. It is the development of the life and the relationship of the life to all that is around that really matters. And above all, the effect that we are having upon those with whom we are associated and the work we do, which affects, for better or for worse, the group in which we find ourselves. In closing this series of lectures, I cannot do better than to quote from St. Paul, where he says, I reckon that the suffering of the present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall he revealed in the glory which shall he revealed in us. I think it's supposed to be B. For we are saved by hope. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God. So yeah, a lot of things we think of as permanent and unchangeable in the future will be proven to be temporary. So what is the hope if not in supposed facts? Paul presents that vision to us that the love of God is a kind of hope for us, that no matter what changing circumstances, that love will still be there for us. So we'll move on to the next day's quote. Let's see here. I would preface what I have to say with the reminder that I only make a suggestion and that naught that I say carries with it the slightest weight of authority, and also that I am aware of the frequent futility of such appeals for cooperation. The history of the world of thought evidences the fact that men are often thrilled and enlightened and aided by ideas and by the promise of a developing future, but that when their aid is sought in materializing the idea, then their hope and interest fade out of the mental plane, or if it reaches the world of emotion and of strong desire, the sacrifice required to bring the hope to birth on the physical plane is lacking or too feeble to produce the longed for result. What I have to say as a result as a result of the urgency upon me to bring about a more intensive cooperation upon the part of those who read with interest the pamphlet the next 3 years, carries not the smallest fraction of authority. I only appeal to you in the hope of intensifying your effort for the space of the next 2 years. One has already passed, because after early autumn of 1936, any effort along this particular line will either have failed or will no longer be required in this particular form. My sole responsibility is to put the opportunity before the world aspirants, to point out to them the inherent possibilities of this peculiar situation, and to indicate lines of helpful activity, and then, having so done, to withdraw the power of my mind and thought, and so leave each aspirant free to come to his own decisions. The pamphlet the next 3 years is going forth today upon its mission. Its objective is to educate public opinion. It carries both inspiration and the power to produce cleavages in the life, cleavages which will produce new activities and a cessation of old attitudes of mind. A possible happening is indicated, the formation upon the physical plane of that group of aspirants and disciples, which, given time and opportunity, can salvage a distressing world and bring light and understanding to humanity. As to this, I need say no more. So this pamphlet, the next 3 years, if I understand correctly here, was incorporated into a treatise on white magic, pages 401 to 433, and esoteric psychology, pages 170 to 189. So I was actually for the 1930s, a period of time there, but there's certainly value in reading through it today, and you can check out those sources if you want to. But it's interesting what he says about people are fascinated and thrilled and even, aided and inspired by thoughts of the future or hope, but people lose interest in them, and if they have a strong desire or interest, they wind up not making the needed sacrifices to implement it. I remember in this group I was in recently, somebody shared a meme, and the first thing was like it was like a Far Side sort of looking thing. There's a politician up on stage, and he said, "Who wants the world to change?" or "Who wants things to change?" And everybody in the audience put up their hand. And then the next picture was the same guy, and he said, "Who wants to change themselves?" And nobody put up their hand. So it's kind of like that, unfortunately. On the next quote. When you add to the above the equally large flood of communications which emanate from the transmitter's own souls, from the realm of the subconscious, you have accounted for the mass of material going out. In all these, in all this, there is need for deep thankfulness at the growing responsiveness to the sensitivity of man. So he's talking about channeling and sort of telepathic and astral communications here. That's what he's referencing. At the first reaction, and the effect of such an outpouring of communications is oft an increase of spiritual pride and ambition, and that the stepping down of the teaching from the mind to the brain, and from the brain into words and sentences often fails in adequacy is sadly true, and that there is frequently misapprehension as to the emanating source of the instructions is also true. For the lack of humility in man and the lack of a true sense of proportion are great. But out of this inflow from the subjective side of life are coming new knowledge, increased devotion to the plan, and those indications which will eventually bring us assurance. Men will know, and know soon, that the soul is not an imaginary fiction, that it is not just a symbolic way of expressing a man's deep-seated hope, and is not man's method of building a defense mechanism, nor is it an illusionary way of escaping from a distressing present. They will know that the soul is a being that is responsible for all that appears upon the phenomenal plane. And so what's the hope he's talking about here? It's the soul, the higher self. And it's not just a figment of one's imagination. the next quote. This one's pretty interesting. It might also be stated here that the construction of the bridge whereby the consciousness can function with facility both in the higher worlds and the lower is primarily brought about by a definitely directed life tendency, which steadily drives the man in the direction of the world of spiritual realities and certain dynamic movements of planned and carefully timed and directed orientation or focusing. And he's talking about the rainbow bridge, the Antakarana, the Bifrost, as Norse mythology calls it. In this last process, the gain of the past months or years is closely assessed, and the effect of that gain upon the daily life and in the bodily mechanisms is carefully studied, and the will to live as a spiritual being is wrought into the consciousness with a definiteness and a determination to make for immediate progress. Disciples in the group of some of the masters, not all, are encouraged every 7 years to do this and to subject themselves to what is esoterically called a crisis of polarization. This process is in the nature of a review, such as one imposes on the consciousness at night, only it is carried over a period of years instead of hours. This thought merits consideration. So the evening review is what I think he's referring to here, and that's the process where before you go to bed at night, you look back on your day, perhaps in reverse chronological order, and just consider what happened and the meaning of things. And so this is a process where you review the last several years of your life. This building of the Antas Karana is most assuredly proceeding in the case of every dedicated aspirant. And he refers to it slightly differently here, despite wording the Antakarana another way in most of the writings. When the work is carried on intelligently and with full awareness of the desired purpose, and when the aspirant not only recognizes the process, but is alert and active in its fulfillment, then the work proceeds apace and the bridge is built. One thing only need be added in connection with the building of the Antakarana, and that is the statement of the significant fact that the more people can achieve this linking of the higher and lower aspects of the human nature, the more rapidly will the task of salvaging the world proceed. The more painstakingly and persistently this work is carried forward, the sooner will the hierarchy of the planet resume its ancient task and status in the world, and the sooner will the mysteries be restored and the world function, therefore, more consciously in line with the plan. Every single unit of the human family who achieves success upon the path of discipleship may be, in himself, relatively of small importance, but the massed units are of tremendous potency. I tell you at this time for your cheering and encouragement that the numbers of the disciples in the world are greatly increasing. Suffering and trouble, apprehension, and the process whereby detachment and dispassion are enforced are doing their needed work. Here and there throughout the world, in every nation, and practically every week, men and women are stepping off the path of probation onto the path of discipleship. In this lies the hope of the world today. And in this fact is to be found the greatly increased activity of the masters. So process of building the Antakarana, the bridge between the higher and lower, there's a lot in it. But one thing he's indicating here is this process of every 7 years looking back on your life and reviewing the events of it. But how does he put it here? And the will to live as a spiritual being is wrought into the consciousness with a definiteness and a determined to make for immediate progress. So I guess I'll leave that up to your interpretation. But the hope here is it building that bridge between the higher and the lower. And that each person that does that and begins walking the path of discipleship is one unit that's added to this mass of humanity, of discipleship, that's sort of invoking the kingdom of God, connecting more directly with humanity, bit by bit. So the building of the Antakarana is the hope that he references in this quote. And the final quote we'll be considering, and this, like much of these writings, this was written during the middle of last century. So it's still applicable today, but just to give you the context. The urgency of the need and how to meet it. Again, let us recognize it. The urgency is great. The emergency is upon us, and a united effort, prayerfully carried forward, wisely adjusted to environing need, and widely blended with all the similar efforts which may be working cooperatively in every land with the forces of construction, national, religious, and economic, can change the aspect of world affairs in the space of a few years. There is not an appreciable change in human relations, then there will be little immediate hope of bringing about that united effort which will lead to world stabilization, interracial and international understanding, economic interdependence, and universal goodwill. It is for the goodwill, it is for the goodwill of the intelligentsia, sorry, but no, for it, sorry, for it is the goodwill of the powerful groups of humanity, and therefore the masses, and the goodwill of the intelligentsia, and the influential middle classes, which will bring about the needed intelligent changes, which can affect every human being. The hope of the world today lies in the development of goodwill, not peace, as the word is usually interpreted to mean merely an enforced freedom from war and an expediently enforced pacifism, but the cultivation of a spirit of goodwill, intelligently applied and worked out with purpose into the fabric of the individual and national life. So goodwill is the hope of things, and working that out intelligently and purposefully into your individual life and into the life of your nation is the hope of things to come, as he's stating here. We have here presented to us two modes of approaching the problem. To consideration of this, all of us are called who are now present workers or leaders in the new group of world servers, or who desire to enlist ourselves among them. The next consideration is how can these ideas be intelligently understood? How can they evoke cooperation of aspirants and disciples over the world? And so the new group of world servers is this group that doesn't have any kind of outer organization. It's a kind of a group of consciousness of people who are working to better the world and spread goodwill. There's other sort of facets to it, but that's the gist of it. It's a sort of a band of people who may not know each other consciously, but they're operating on the same sort of spiritual impulse, if you will, and that's what calls them and makes them part of this group. But the working out of goodwill into one's life intelligently and purposefully is really important here, because goodwill, it can be sort of superficial. It can be, oh, I'm just sort of superficially nice, but real goodwill isn't about pretending. It comes from a deeper place of seeing the soul in others, in connecting on a more heart-centered level. And it's not sort of sentimental, but is intelligently applied. Like, goodwill misapplied could be enabling people in bad habits and just being superficially nice to them. But goodwill might look like tough love at times, and other times it might be seeing that somebody's struggling and being kind to them anyway, instead of giving them guff. But yeah, so that's it for the quotes today. So the announcement is I'm gonna be taking my computer to the shop. Um, so there won't be a stream next week and perhaps the week after that. I've also been reconsidering if I should keep doing these streams because the views, um, such as last week's video got three views, no likes. So I kind of wonder how useful this is. So I have to do some considering if I'm going to keep doing this or I'm going to put it on hiatus. I kind of don't have like a ton of energy. That's why I'm doing these kind of live streams where I just read through the quotes instead of putting in a lot of effort producing videos that might be a little more attractive. But yeah, I might start up doing the live streams again after a week or two. I'll just have to see where things are, consider what's the best way to sort of bring the ideals and higher consciousness to the fore for people. But that'll be it for the stream today. Like, share, and subscribe if you appreciated it. And I'll see you at some point in the future in some form. For now, this is Joshua's Magic, bidding you all a fond farewell. Oh, I did want to say, give you some questions to consider on goodwill for the time being, because that's a potentially very powerful force if applied appropriately. Um, and like I was saying, of course, kind of emotional goodwill, the realm of the mind into correctly understanding things, it can have an effect. So I goodwill along more intentional, intelligent, and in spiritual lines. And where can I apply goodwill in my sphere of influence or in my life that I haven't been applying it heretofore? So I'll leave you with those questions until we connect again. And may the force be with you. Light and love to you all.